Titanic sunk on April 14, 1912. Had it not struck the iceberg, it would have arrived in New York on April 17th. But what was happening in New York on April 17th, 1912? The answer might change history as you know it. Hello everyone, I'm Dom, and I welcome you to a new episode of Odd Curiosities. On April 17th, a Wednesday, there was a solar eclipse, one long awaited by a new religious movement called the Order of the Golden Temple. The OGT was a group of about 120 people located mostly in Manhattan who believed that the sun itself was a temple of gold sacred to the god Apollus, a neo-pagan interpretation of Apollo, who was killed and reborn with each solar eclipse. The OGT was banned in England, where it was formed by Aleister Crowley's aunt, Jessica Caledry's Booth. It was banned because during the eclipse of 1888, Booth and her followers ran rampant through London, committing murders and mutilation, scattering the innards of their victims in occult sigils and eating their spleens. The case of Jack the Ripper was notably a few days after this event. It was not counted amongst them. However, Ripper historians often neglect the note that those murders ended literally the night before Booth and her surviving followers emigrated to New York. Booth's murderous cult arrived at Pier 59, where the Titanic would be scheduled to arrive 24 years later. They festered in the New York underground, all the while growing and preparing for the grand ritual to be performed on April 17, 1912. Documents found in Booth's home after her death suggest that the day would have been one of a mass murder on an unseen scale, in which at least 2,222 residents of the big city would be sacrificed to ensure the sun god's return. But this was not to be. News of the Titanic sinking hit New York on April 16th, and it hit like a ton of bricks. The population was stricken with grief, and that included Mrs. Booth, who had two sisters on the ship, inbound for their dark ritual. She cancelled the ritual and disbanded the cult, having had her fill of death and destruction and loss. And so thousands of lives were lost, and thousands more were saved in that strange April, where the Titanic perished only to prevent the mutilation, death, and spleenal cannibalism that was to take place days later. Here is the strangest thing though. Jessica Booth died a few days after the cancellation of the ritual on April 19, 1912. Her cause of death is unknown, but she promised one thing: the sun god will have his revenge, specifically on the 222nd eclipse after their failure. That eclipse will take place on December 14th, 2020, when Booth said the sun will be eclipsed and never come back. Thankfully, this is all unlikely due to the scientific facts of our sun and moon, the anonymous global dismissal of Booth as a homicidal lunatic, and the failure of her other wild prediction to come true, including England floating away from Europe, the United States being taken over by a lecherous demon, and the decimation of the world's population by the plague. So long as none of those unlikely events happen, we should all be safe.
You're looking at a map of the total solar eclipse that will occur December 14th, 2020.
December 14th, 2020. December 14th, 2020.